Läuft, ja? Okay. So, Fanita, the aim of this session is to summarize your contribution to transactional analysis. So, meaning what is the main part, the essentials, what do you think in terms of concepts, what you brought in the TA. So maybe it could be interesting for everyone to see it in a whole, not only partly.
Yes. Yes, my contributions to TA, the way I see it, have always been tagged on to Byrne, really. That Byrne said or did something and presented something, and I found it enlightening, and then sometimes I disagreed, and then I transformed and changed what he did.
Okay.
And here, before I continue, I'd like to pay homage, number one, to Byrne, of course, for his genius, and to express my sadness that he only had 9 years in which to develop transactional analysis. Actually, from 1961, when his first book came out, Transactional Analysis in Psychotherapy, and his death, his very sudden death in 1970, and I refer to that in my piece on rackets, which came as a blow because that's when I had started really thinking about TA myself and thinking about the areas where I agreed or disagreed. So my contributions would be perhaps, first of all, the approach to TA, that I benefited from his emphasis on 3 ego states which are available in the now. And as a therapist, I appreciated that most of all, that I could see a patient in front of me, or a client, and I could see the little 4-year-old, 3-year-old, 1-year-old child. And my contribution is, in that area, the developmental approach to TA, to think that when the child ego state appears in the now, I always ask myself, which child? The 1-year-old, the 4-year-old, the 5-year-old, and according to whatever happened at that stage, that person is reflecting it in here now. When you read my material, you'll read somewhere the case of Nancy, for instance, who talked about having these terrible nightmares and the shock and the embarrassment. And I describe her case in my article on shame. There are 2 articles I wrote on shame, which I want to refer you to. And I would like people to, it's the first time that somebody started talking about shame in conjunction with TA. And it was dramatic to find that Nancy suddenly appeared shamefaced in front of me, blushing. Somebody, she knew me well, somebody who had an excellent relationship with me and felt very comfortable with me, and all of a sudden she felt terrible. And what was operating at that moment in time in the room with me was the 2-year-old little girl who was shamed by the fact that father came back from the war and she had forgotten how to recite the little poem that mother wanted her to tell her.
So in some way,
Yes?
And so in some way you integrated your knowledge as a child psychotherapist in your professional career you had before the TA, and just to bring it in that kind of concepts, meaning referring to different stages.
Stages of development. The emphasis on stages of development that appear in the now. And when I saw the 2-year-old child who was scared, I was able to talk to the 2-year-old child right there and then, and she was able to get over the panic she experienced about a colleague who had seen something else. So that's one contribution about the developmental stage, and especially the emphasis about how shame, to which a child is particularly vulnerable during the 2 to 3-year-old period, will re-operate again in the now in regard to certain situations. So the emphasis on critical stages of development as resurfacing in the child in the now, number one. out of this comes my concept of survival conclusions. And I describe them where in the long article about 10 tenets of TA, I include a reference to survival conclusions, and I would like a link to that, to tenets. The article is called How I Got into TA, and you can skip the first part, which is biographical, then the second part refers to what we owe Freud, and the third part, starting on page 7, gives you various tenets, and I ask new therapists to read this article, and with that they have the basis of TA. And survival conclusions are human substitutes for instinctual reactions about danger. In the course of evolution, human beings have lost some instinctive reactions. A human child will drown in a swimming pool and be fearless and just walk into a swimming pool, whereas a dog will not drown in a swimming pool, has the instincts. And we develop these survival conclusions, which are life-saving, during the 2 to 4 year old stage. But we also develop what I call archaic or useless survival conclusions, which were very useful
or at
at
least
that
outdated,
time, and later on resurface in the child in a way that they're not useful. And in my writing, I describe the case of a businessman who couldn't understand why he got so terrified when his supervisor walked into his office, and he had the impulse to hide under the desk, and he had to hold on to the desk in order not to hide under the desk. And he had previously had treatment on what was thought to be, a fear of authority or whatever, and it didn't fit because he got along quite well with the supervisor at other times. Only when the supervisor walked into his room did he get scared. Well, what happened was when the supervisor banged the door, it revived a survival conclusion of the 2-year-old phase of hiding under the bed when his drunken father walked into the room at night. And it was the sound, it was a Pavlovian reaction. Conditioned reflex, a survival conclusion is really a conditioned reflex. And it can be useful, or psychologically sometimes it can be very harmful.
Yeah.
Like wanting to hide under the desk. And it's almost incurable as such. He continued to have this reaction whenever the supervisor banged the door. So the way to treat it was simply to ask the supervisor to be careful and not bang the door. And the whole big, major psychological problem was cured. So survival conclusions, when identified in therapy, are very useful. Archaic survival conclusions. That's number 2. Number 3, rackets, and I have a whole session on rackets and racketeering. As I mentioned there, the word is Burns, but the concept of rackets as substitution feelings or attitudes are mine. The next contribution has to do with existential position. Byrne talked about the 4 OK, and I'd like you to read the article on I'm okay, you're okay, adult, or the 5th position.
5th position, yeah.
Again, changes developed during the developmental phase, during the growing phase, and we develop our character type as a defensive position against feeling not okay. And I was influenced by the work of Melanie Klein on what she calls the depressive position that is developed at 6 months, when the child recognizes that the world is no longer just perfect and gets out of the I'm okay, you're okay euphoric position and moves into a defensive position, which is either I'm okay, you're not okay. That's children who feel that they cannot trust their parents too well. Or I'm not okay, you're okay, children who are dominated by their caretakers. And so I developed the concept of personality type 1, the I'm not okay, you're okay person, and type 2, I'm okay, you're not okay. And these are defensive positions when the person feels under strain and feels afraid of life not working out for him or her. We've got a whole book on that,
Yep.
you and I, where you adapted the whole concept to business people and people in work. And it's in German, and I hope the book will be translated sometime.
We will see.
What's the name of the book?
Lebenscoaching.
Lebenscoaching.
So
And we
kind
talk-
of life coaching, yeah.
Yeah, and we use Hamlet as a prototype for the I'm not okay person, I'm not okay, and Othello as a prototype for the I'm okay, you're not okay, who then in both situations switch very dramatically into the opposite position when things get too tough. You really will need to read the whole book.
Yeah,
I
for sure.
can't possibly summarize. But here I would like you to read the article on the fifth position as a way of modifying Burns' concept of 4 positions. I have 5 positions. The fifth position is I'm okay, you're okay, adult, where I can use my adult and see that behaviors may be not okay sometimes, but basically a person can be thought of as okay, even horrible person, a murderer or whatever. But this position is different. The I'm okay, you're okay adult is different from the early baby's position, which is I'm okay, you're okay, euphoric, where the baby is in paradise.
Yeah.
So that's on the existential position. That would be my contribution, a change in the existential, on conceptualizing the existential position. Then another contribution I have is a new way of thinking of scripts. Again, Byrne changed his mind a lot about scripts. I have mentioned that he only had 9 years in which to develop his theories. And he was influenced originally by other theorists to think that scripts were negative, that it was harmful, that you develop harmful patterns in childhood, and that the script may push you in a harmful decision. And I, on the contrary, think that the script is a very positive, useful way of functioning, and that the script supports us throughout our lives. I would like you to read my article, Let's Not Call It Script Where It Ain't. That was written after Byrne's death, and that article was painful. It hurt me. I experienced pain in writing it because I felt I was being disloyal to Byrne in claiming that scripts are not the way he quite described them. There's a lot of, many therapists now still use the reference to script as a negative reference. So-and-so had script led him to bad things, and I think that is a confusion of script with episcript. I'll refer to that. So at any rate, my contribution is thinking of scripts in a positive way. My article
as
in
a narrative
the book,
in some
yeah,
way.
yeah, narrative. My article on scripts in my chapter on scripts in the book by Richard Erskine on scripts describes my position there about scripts. And earlier I had the article Wither Scripts, which is linked, to which I would which I would like you to read as a link to this present presentation. From here we move on to my concept, number 6, to my concept of hot potato and episcripts. And interestingly enough, this concept was developed by me still just before Burns' death in 1970, and Byrne got to include it in his book, What You Say After You Say Hello. Originally I called the concept anti-script, and Byrne changed the name very appropriately to episcript, and refers to it in his book. Then he changes the name again to overscript. At any rate, the concept is based on the name, the theory of episcript is based on the hot potato transmission, on the idea that psychologically negative attitudes and feelings and tasks can be transmitted by a powerful individual to a powerless individual. My article was published on episcripts was published in the Bulletin just before, in October 1969. There's a link to it, just before Burns' death. And then there is a tape, a whole presentation that I made on scripts and episcripts, and that presentation is available, can be ordered through USATA, USATAA, 2 A's. And I would urge you to order it and read it. It's too long for me to summarize now the idea of hot potato and episcript. It's quite important in understanding the 9/11 events that occurred, because bin Laden passed on hot potatoes to these young, devout followers of his, and they were episcripted by him to proceed to try and destroy the reputation of the United States. And the 9/11 attacks are due to bin Laden having episcripted these young men into wanting to attack the United States.
A bit more we have in the tape about episcript within this website.
This tape describes the whole process. I'm sorry, I am not describing it very well here. It's kind of complex.
Yeah, it's an overview. We give only an overview.
This is an overview. I do hope that people will listen to that tape at some point. My other contribution, number 7, is the contribution of the three-cornered contract. And here you have a link to a very short article, just a one-page article, which transforms the Burns' concept of contract, which is between two parties, to a concept of contract where a third party is involved. And I was surprised that this had not occurred to other people before. Anyway, that article describes the misunderstandings that occurred and how the concept of the three-cornered contract originated. It's used a lot in business, and I'm being given credit for the three-cornered contract. Originally, General Electric and the US Navy asked for permission to republish this one-page article, which seemed very elementary to me. Anyway, I'm honored for that. And last not least is my concept of motivators. And this refers to a book that has not been written. And it's a concept that I've struggled with a lot. It's how our energy really can be subdivided into 3 different directions. And I had, originally I had a tape, a video tape, which was called The Forces Within Us, and I hope that people will want to see that tape. At that time I used different names for the three drives. At the present time, I talk about three drives, three ways in which our energy can affect us. And by now there are three new names. I imagine them as three Greek goddesses that affect us. And there is the goddess of survival, whom I refer to as Servia. And she has various attributes which take care of us and contribute to our survival. Then there is the goddess of Passion, which has other attributes where we become excited, curiosity, sexuality. And the third goddess is the goddess of transcendence, Transcia, which carries us outside the everyday life. And with each goddess, our relationship to time is different. We must balance our energy and operate sometimes in accordance with survival and sometimes in accordance with passion, where we lose track of everything, but our energy goes into excitement and passion, be it sexual, be it creativity, be it discovery, and lastly, transcendence, where we can escape everyday chores, transient. Well, I am unable to describe this properly, and I refer to the unwritten book, and the best way you can read about it is in my article on trauma. It's entitled, which is linked to this present, What Motivates Resilience After Trauma? And in addition then to a workshop which has been taped, you can see the sketch. You can see the sketch of how our energy moves through us, through our ego states, and you can find the listing of attributes which identify each one of the three motivators.
And in addition, we have a particular videotape on motivators and drives on the website as well.
Yes, yes. I am sorry I don't think you get a real sense about it in this presentation, but that's what I am really proudest of. Here we have the different three attributes. I hope you read it, and I hope you listen. That tape with the original tape, 1998, gives you a visual picture, though the names are different. I use expressive instead of passion.
Okay.
Originally, I tried to think of the motivators as being part of the child, but they're not part of the child. They're the energy system that flows through us. It's not very clear. I'm sorry.
Yeah, maybe it's a concept in development.
Yes, that's right. And maybe other people are going to have to develop it. I think you can get some ideas by reading this article. Before closing, I want to give credit to the Italians. Well, I should have given credit to the Germans who are with you and the French. I've got a lot of material in these three languages, and you can look up the full bibliography in the different languages. And quite recently, the Italians
published or what?
Dolores Gunnari has contributed a great deal, has used some of my material in relation to children, and she received the Eric Berne Memorial Award for her contributions about children, and she gives me credit in her latest book, Quaderno in Italy, which I would like to link in here too. Yes, I received the Berne a memorial prize for my contributions on rackets and my contributions on episcripts. Although it was given in reverse order, I was credited for rackets first and episcripts afterwards, but originally I wrote on episcripts before writing on
Okay.
rackets.
History sometimes is funny. But overall, you had a lot of conceptual contribution to TTA. In your own meaning and understanding, does it mean that you founded a own school, a Fanita English school of TA, or what's your understanding of it?
Not really, not really. My own script referred to my having wanted to be a gypsy. My image of myself as a child was that the gypsies whom I saw on the streets of Istanbul, female gypsies, represented the ideal of free women who could wear colorful clothes and get their palms crossed with silver, that was, and just travel around and not worry very much about what they were doing. So I never really seriously founded a school. I did train a lot of people, but much of my training was hit and miss.
Okay.
And really, I think that this legacy is also a little bit, as I say goodbye, is hit and miss. I owe a great deal to Byrne, and I owe a great deal to David Kupfer, who did not get enough credit in his life because he didn't write. But he was my mentor and taught me TA in addition to Byrne.
So in some way it's an addition to lots of other schools of TA,
Yes.
and I think it's a very creative one with very different aspects of the human being, and maybe it's a present to all who wants to work with it and to develop it further.
That's right.
That's okay. Good. Thank you for doing this.
And Joachim, I cannot thank you enough for all you have done for me. First of all, by inviting me to all these workshops. We had a wonderful time doing workshops in Italy, in German, in Italy. I mean,
yeah, but Italy is
it's
more.
all
It's
been
more.
very, very.
More
And you have inspired me with many, many questions and contributions, and the best one of which was the fact that we had the opportunity to write a book together.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.